Somewhere inside the operations office of the National Bank Open in Toronto, somebody looked at a ticketing report and realized they had a problem. Not a good problem, an actual one. The Grandstand court at that tournament holds 2,800 people. Eala was scheduled to play there. And according to the tournament, she had likely already sold somewhere north of 5,000 tickets for that slot. Read that again, because in the ticketing business, that sentence is not a celebration. It is an incident report. You have moved close to double the inventory of the room you own. So they did something tournaments almost never do. They pulled the match out of the grandstand entirely and moved it to center court. Center court holds 10,000. And it sold out too. Now here is the detail that made me stop and go back through the reporting twice. According to the tournament, in the last 2 decades in Toronto, the only other woman who had filled center court on a Wednesday night was Serena Williams. Serena Williams. And a 21-year-old from the Philippines who, at that exact moment, had held her first ever WTA Tour title for a grand total of about 4 days. So I want to take you inside this, because the story everybody told about that week was the crowd. Flags, noise, energy, great atmosphere. Fine. That is the postcard version. I am interested in the paperwork. Because moving a match is not editing a line on a schedule. It sets off a chain reaction through television windows, through session tickets people already bought for specific seats, through every other match that day. It costs real money, and it carries real risk. And I will show you exactly why in a minute. Which raises the obvious question. If it is that expensive and that risky, why did Toronto do it? And the answer is that 7 months earlier, on the other side of the world, a different tournament chose not to. They made the safe call, the one nobody gets fired for. It did not go well. Thousands of people bought tickets to see her and never saw a single point of tennis. That is the first half of this video. The second half is the part nobody has covered at all, and it is the one I actually could not stop thinking about. Because every number I just gave you is a number about her. 10,000 seats. Serena comparisons. Sold out. Nobody has asked what those numbers weigh when you are the 21-year-old standing on the baseline underneath them. So they moved her. And to understand how unusual that is, you first need to understand what moving a match actually costs a tournament. Because it is nothing like changing a line on a schedule. Here is what tennis broadcasts never show you. A tournament schedule is not a list. It is a chain. Center court has a day session and a night session. Television contracts are attached to specific windows, sometimes in 3 or 4 different countries at once. Men's matches and women's matches are braided together across 9 days, and every match has a projected length that everything behind it depends on. Pull one match out of one court and everything downstream of it moves with it. That is the first cost. Now the second one. And this is the one that actually generates angry emails. Tickets already sold are tickets already sold. Somebody bought a grandstand seat. A specific seat. In a specific section. For a specific session. Then you tell them the match they came for is happening in a different building on the other side of the grounds. Now you are running a seating problem. A refund problem. And a customer service problem. All in the space of about 24 hours. With people who flew in for this. And then the third cost, which is the biggest one, and the reason tournaments almost never do this. An empty center court looks far worse than a packed side court. Think about it from the broadcast angle. The wide shot. The camera pulls back between points, and the whole world sees your building. If a side court is overflowing, the visual story is demand. If a 10,000-seat stadium is half full, the visual story is failure. And it is broadcast internationally, and your sponsors are watching. And next year's negotiations start from that image. So the incentive structure is brutally simple. Overcrowding a small court is embarrassing for a few hundred people on the ground. An empty big court is embarrassing in front of millions. Which means the safe play is always the same. Leave her on the small court. Let it overflow. Apologize to whoever complains. Nobody in the history of tournament operations has ever been fired for that decision. So understand what actually happened in Toronto. Somebody in that office looked at a 21-year-old ranked outside the top 20, with one tour title to her name, and decided to bet 10,000 seats on her. In public. On television. That is not a compliment. That is a wager, made by professionals, with their own reputations attached. And they had a reason to believe. A few weeks earlier in Washington, the chairman of the DC Open, Mark Aryna, had said out loud that at least 80% of the inquiries coming into his ticketing operation were about Eala, in a field that included Jessica Pegula, Naomi Osaka, Venus Williams, and Madison Keys. So the data existed. Toronto was not guessing blind. But data on a spreadsheet and 10,000 physical human beings walking through a turnstile are two very different things, and the gap between them is where careers in this business get made or ended. If this is the layer of tennis you find interesting, the operations, the wagers, the stuff happening behind the scoreboard, subscribe, because I am going to keep pulling this thread straight through the US Open, and I think the next 2 weeks are going to be genuinely wild. Now, I said the safe choice is always to leave her on the small court and let it overflow. 7 months before Toronto, on the other side of the world, one tournament made exactly that choice, and it went very badly. January 2026. Melbourne. The Australian Open put Eala on a small outer court for her first round match. And I want to be fair to them here, because on paper that was the correct decision. She was not in the top 20. She had no tour title. She had never been past the second round of a major. Every model they had said outer court, and every model they had was working with the data that exists. Then the people came. Hundreds of them. By some accounts, thousands. Lining up for a first-round match on a court most fans could not have found on a map of the grounds. And most of them never saw a single point. Not one. The court simply could not hold them. So people ended up standing around the giant screens in the public areas, watching a live tennis match that was physically happening 100 meters away. Sit with that for a second, because I think the number version undersells it. Picture a family, 2 parents, a couple of kids. They bought grounds passes. Some of them flew in. A few of them almost certainly took time off work, because a Filipino playing in the main draw of a Grand Slam was not a thing that had ever really happened before. And this one might actually win. They got up early. They queued. And then a steward told them the court was full. So they walked over to a screen, in the sun, in a public plaza, and watched their player on television, while standing inside the stadium complex she was playing in. Hold that image, because in about 4 minutes, I am going to show you what that same crowd costs her when she loses. So the mini question: how does a Grand Slam with decades of operational experience get a projection that wrong? And the answer is not incompetence. The answer is that every attendance model in tennis runs on ranking, and her ranking at that moment said nothing. It said 30-something. It said outer court. The model was not stupid. The model was missing a variable, and there was no field on the form to enter it. Eala has talked about this herself, and it is telling how she describes it. She said one of the first times she was really taken aback was that Australian Open. And she said the whole Middle Eastern swing was eye-opening for her too. Taken aback. Eye-opening. That is a player describing something happening to her, not something she engineered. Now, here is the part I find genuinely remarkable, and it is why Melbourne matters more than any single crowd shot from Toronto. Nobody made that mistake again. The entire industry adjusted. The Canadian Open proactively altered its schedule to handle her ticket demand, which is the story we opened with. Washington went further and booked her onto Stadium Court, 7,500 seats, for every single one of her matches that week. Not the final, not the semifinal, all of them, starting with a first-round match against a player ranked outside the top 100 at the time. 7 months. That is how long it took for a global sport to collectively rewrite how it handles one athlete. Think about how rare that is. Tournaments do not change behavior for players. Players adapt to tournaments. That is the entire power structure of professional tennis, and it has worked that way for 50 years. Venues do not get rearranged because a 21-year-old showed up. Except this time they did, repeatedly, on 3 continents, inside a single season. Which brings me to the second mini question. And this is the one that kept nagging at me. If every attendance model in this sport is missing a variable, what exactly is the missing variable? And why did it take an oversold outer court in Melbourne for anybody to notice? Because the answer is not a secret. It is not hidden in some proprietary database. It is publicly available demographic information that anybody could have looked up in about 4 minutes. The sport just never thought to look, because the sport has never had to. So the tournaments adjusted, every one of them, in about 7 months. The models got rewritten. The stadiums got upgraded. The scheduling got smarter. But nobody adjusted anything for her. And that is the part of this story almost nobody has looked at. Up to this point, you have been reading this story as a win. 10,000 seats. Sold out. Serena territory. And it is a win. I am not going to pretend otherwise, but I want you to read the exact same facts from inside the baseline. Because from there, every number in this video is a weight, and she never asked for a single one of them. Start with the mechanics of what happened in Toronto. When a tournament moves your match from a 2,800-seat court to a 10,000-seat stadium, nobody consults you. You are informed. You find out the same way you find out about a schedule change, on a piece of paper or from your coach. So the match you mentally prepared for, in an intimate space with a few thousand people close to the court, is now happening in a stadium, under broadcast lighting, in front of 10,000 people, most of them waving the flag of your country, all of them having paid money specifically to watch you. That is a different sport. The ball is the same. Nothing else is. And listen to how she describes this. Because she has been remarkably honest about it. She said she does not know what it is, but it surprises her every time. She said sometimes she forgets the impact that she holds, and she does not expect the number of people who come out to support her. Her coach said the team never thought she would get support like this. Read that again. Her own coaching staff did not see this coming. Nobody in her camp built a plan for it, because nobody could have predicted it. There was no precedent, which means she is learning how to handle superstar-level pressure at the exact same time she is learning how to win tournaments. Most players get those two things 10 years apart. And then there was the match that showed everybody what the other side of this looks like. Packed court. Every seat taken. She wins the first set. 6 games to love. 6-love. The crowd is losing its mind. And then she loses. 0-6, 6-3, 6-2, to Alicia Parks. The umpire had to repeatedly ask the crowd for quiet as they tried and failed to will her through it. And when it was over, she was escorted off the court by a wall of security, as many as a dozen guards around her. A 21-year-old, walking off after a loss, surrounded by security, past thousands of people who came specifically for her. And then she said the thing that is the entire point of this video. She said the welcome she got all week was heartwarming, and that this was one of the things that made a loss like that a little bit harder because she knew a lot of people were rooting for her. That sentence should stop you. The crowd is not only an asset. When you lose, the crowd is an invoice. Here is the comparison that makes it land. Almost every young player on tour gets to lose in private. You go out on court 9 in front of 200 people, you play badly, you shake hands, you walk back to the hotel, and by dinner the world has forgotten. That privacy is how young players survive the years where they are still figuring it out. It is a form of protection nobody talks about because nobody notices it until it is gone. Eala lost the right to lose privately at 20 years old. Every defeat she has is a national event. It gets covered in Manila. It trends. Thousands of people who traveled to watch her go home disappointed. And she watches them do it. From the court. While security walks her out. And there is no version of this where it gets smaller. The community that produces those crowds is 15 million Filipinos living outside the Philippines, spread across more than 100 countries. Which means there is no such thing as an away match for her. And no such thing as a match that does not matter. So look at the two halves of this season side by side. The tournaments adjusted their attendance models in 7 months. They hired analysts. They moved courts. They upgraded stadiums. They fixed the spreadsheet. She had to adjust her entire competitive psychology in those same 7 months. With no template. With no Filipino player who came before her to call and ask what this feels like. With a coaching team that admits they did not see it coming either. One of those adjustments is a business decision. The other one is a person. I want to know where you land on this, because I genuinely go back and forth. At 21 years old, is that crowd the greatest advantage in women's tennis right now? Or is it the heaviest thing anybody on that tour is carrying? Tell me in the comments. And be honest, because I think the answer changes depending on whether she wins in New York. So that is the cost. Now let me show you what she has actually done while carrying it. Because the results say something the pressure narrative does not. Washington, 3 weeks ago. Every single one of her matches was booked onto a stadium court holding 7,500 people. Not the final, not the semifinal. All of them, from the first round on. So here is the list of what she did while carrying all of that. Round 1. Zheng Qinwen, the Olympic gold medalist from Paris. Down a set. Wins 4-6, 6-4, 6-1. Round 2. Leylah Fernandez, the defending champion of the tournament. Down 5. Won in the second set. Wins 6-2, 7-6. Quarterfinals, Aryna Svitolina, world number 10. 6-3, 6-4. Semifinals, Naomi Osaka, former world number 1, 4-time Grand Slam champion. 6-4, 6-2. Final, Jessica Pegula, world number 3. Down a set again. 4-6, 6-4, 6-love. 5 matches. 5 opponents who have all been ranked inside the world's top 10. The largest crowds of her life in the stands for every single one of them. And she won all 5. So the pressure is real. Everything I said in the last section still stands. But it has not broken her yet. And that distinction matters, because plenty of talented players have gone the other way, under a fraction of that attention. Now, for anybody thinking the crowd did the work, here is one number that settles it. In that final, Eala won 84.4% of the points behind her first serve. 38 out of 45. Jessica Pegula won 56.5% of hers. A crowd cannot serve for you. A crowd cannot hold you at love in a deciding set. That number is technique and nerve, executed under the loudest conditions of her career. Now zoom out, because a single week could be a wave. The season is not. She started 2026 ranked 50th in the world. In February, she became the first Filipino woman inside the top 40 in the entire 51-year history of the WTA rankings. In July, she beat the defending champion Iga Swiatek at Wimbledon and reached the second week of a Grand Slam for the first time. In August, she won Washington, the first WTA Tour title in the history of the Philippines, and she is now inside the top 20, with one outlet listing her career high at 18. 9 career wins over top 10 players, 7 of them since January of this year. And here is where all of it circles back to the seeding chart. A player ranked 28th in the world is normally projected to fill a 2,000 to 3,000 seat show court, which is almost exactly the capacity of the Toronto Grandstand. So the model was not broken. The model was right about players ranked 28th. The model was simply wrong about her by roughly 20 ranking positions worth of demand. Her crowd was traveling at top 5 scale, while her ranking was still climbing through the 20s. That is the number the entire industry just had to learn how to calculate. And now she walks into New York ranked 20th, projected to be seeded, playing 3 separate events. The women's singles, the stars of the Open exhibition, and her first ever Grand Slam mixed doubles, partnered with Felix Auger-Aliassime. The draw comes out on August 27th. The main draw starts on the 30th. If the Toronto logic holds, the outer courts at Flushing Meadows are not going to be an option for her. But here is the thing I saved for the people still watching, and it is the detail that reframes this entire video for me. She has done something on those exact courts before. In 2022, at Flushing Meadows, Alexandra Eala won the U.S. Open Girls singles title, beating Lucy Havlikova in the final. There was no crowd, no flags in the stands, no security detail walking her off, no tournament director rearranging a schedule because of her. She won the first major title of her life on those grounds, in near silence, in front of the handful of people who show up to junior finals. 4 years later, she is going back to the same place, and 10,000 people would show up to watch her practice. So the 10,000 seats in Toronto are not the beginning of this story. They are the moment the rest of the world finally caught up to something that started on those same courts 4 years ago, when nobody was looking, the seats got sold. The matches got won. But there is one consequence of all of this that goes past her entirely, and it is about to change how this sport schedules tennis matches. Tennis assigns courts by ranking, because ranking is the only thing this sport knows how to measure. Toronto just proved that model is missing a column. And Melbourne already showed everyone what missing that column costs, in the form of a few thousand people standing outside a fence, watching a screen. And here is why this outlives Eala entirely. The lesson transfers. It is not a Filipino lesson. It is a lesson about any athlete from any country with a large population living somewhere else. Somebody in an operations department is going to build a new attendance model because of what happened this year, with a field on the form that nobody thought to include before, and Eala will be the reason it exists. Now, what it means for her. Commercial power arriving before ranking is one of the rarest positions in professional sport. It flips the relationship. Normally, the tournament grants the player a stage. In her case, tournaments need her more than she needs them. At 21, with one tour title. That leverage does not usually show up until a player has 4 or 5 majors. She got it before her first. And the reason those 10,000 people come back, rather than showing up once for the novelty, is something she said in Washington that has stuck with me. An interviewer asked what it feels like to be that popular around the world. She said the question should be rephrased. It should be, what is it like to be Filipino? Then she turned to the stands and said, Salamat, mga kababayan. She has never once treated that crowd as customers. So let me close where I started, with the arithmetic. Every number in this video is a number about chairs. 2,800, 5,000, 10,000, 7,500, but every one of those chairs is a person. Somebody who bought a ticket, drove 3 hours, brought a flag, sat down, and watched somebody who looks like them do something nobody from their country had ever done. And in Melbourne, thousands of those people did all of that, and then watched it on a screen from outside the court. That is what the missing column in the spreadsheet actually was. It was them. So here is what I want to know. If 10,000 was the ceiling in Toronto, what happens in New York, where the community is larger and the stadium is bigger and she arrives seated instead of unseated? And then the harder question, the one I do not think anybody has actually put to her. Does she want that? Because everything in this video has been about what the crowd does for her and what it does to tournaments. Almost nobody has asked, the 21-year-old in the middle of it, whether she would trade some of it back for the right to lose a tennis match quietly. The draw comes out on August 27th. The main draw starts on the 30th. Subscribe. Because I am going to be watching the seeding charts as closely as the scoreboard over the next 2 weeks,